Now, when I use the term sack, what I mean is tackle. And basically, a tackle looks something like this.
Buck Rogers in the 25th century arrived at a time when American television was scrambling to capture the rising wave of space adventure. It looked bright and playful on the surface. Yet, behind the scenes, the show carried layers of conflict, ambition, and unexpected chaos that never reached the screen. What many fans remember as a fun blend of futurism and charm was shaped by battles within the studio, abrupt rewrites, hidden production dangers, and surprising artistic choices that almost derailed the series before it even began. In this documentary-style journey, we uncover the strange truths behind the polished exterior. These are the most bizarre, controversial, and startling facts about Buck Rogers in the 25th century that most viewers never discovered. The show was almost canceled before episode 1 due to an internal feud at NBC. Before Buck Rogers ever reached a television audience, internal conflict at NBC almost shut the project down. Executives disagreed sharply on what tone the series should take. Some wanted a grounded science fiction adventure with serious themes, while others pushed for a lighter style similar to late 70s entertainment. Budget concerns increased the tension, as many doubted whether the network could support an effects-heavy weekly show. The pilot film, originally created for theatrical release, added more complexity. NBC feared that the high production quality of the pilot would raise viewer expectations beyond what the weekly series could deliver. Meetings grew heated, and several executives recommended cancellation before broadcast. Only after extensive negotiation with Universal did the network choose to proceed. When Buck Rogers finally premiered, audiences never realized how close it came to disappearing before it ever began. Gil Gerard tried to quit multiple times and clashed with producers over the message of the show. Gil Gerard became the recognizable face of Buck Rogers, but his off-screen experience was filled with creative disagreements. Gerard believed Buck should be portrayed with seriousness and depth, reflecting the character's long legacy. However, the network preferred a more playful tone that appealed to younger viewers. This difference caused frequent tension. Gerard regularly challenged dialogue he felt was too comedic or inconsistent with the character. On occasion, he rewrote lines moments before filming. Crew members recalled production delays while disputes were resolved on set. At several points, Gerard privately expressed a desire to leave the show entirely. Even so, producers understood that replacing the lead actor would jeopardize the entire project. Negotiations and compromises continued throughout filming. Gerard's determination ultimately shaped the character, giving Buck a grounded presence that balanced the lighter tone around him. Universal Pictures originally planned a dark, adult-rated theatrical trilogy before switching to a TV series. Few fans know that Buck Rogers was initially developed as a darker, adult-oriented theatrical trilogy. Early drafts featured political tension, high-stakes conflict, and more intense action than the television version ever presented. Concept art revealed a grittier world where the Draconian Empire was a harsh military force, rather than the glamorous society shown later. However, test screenings of the pilot movie changed everything. Younger audiences responded strongly to its adventurous and upbeat energy. Universal recognized that the project might succeed better on television than in theaters. NBC quickly expressed interest, and the trilogy plan was abandoned in favor of a weekly series. To meet broadcast standards, writers softened characters, removed mature themes, and reshaped the narrative into a family-friendly adventure. Although only the pilot reached theaters, traces of the darker vision remain in sets, designs, and plot elements carried over from those early scripts. Erin Gray was forced to fight for equal pay, despite being a lead star. Erin Gray's portrayal of Colonel Wilma Deering remains one of the most memorable elements of Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Yet, her experience behind the scenes was marked by a persistent struggle for fair compensation. Despite being a lead actor and a central figure in the narrative, Gray was not initially offered equal pay. Several interviews revealed that she learned her male colleagues were being compensated at significantly higher rates, even though she carried equal narrative weight and screen presence. Gray had already built a respected career in modeling and television, which made the pay disparity particularly surprising. She confronted producers and network representatives with direct questions about her contract and insisted on renegotiation. The issue was complicated because producers were concerned about budget constraints, and equal pay would require adjusting multiple aspects of the cast salary structure. However, Gray was determined. She has stated in interviews that she believes strongly in the importance of Wilma Deering as a role model, especially for young girls who finally saw a capable, authoritative woman in a science fiction setting. Her argument was simple. If the character represents leadership and professionalism on screen, the actor behind that character should not be treated as secondary. Her persistence eventually led to adjustments, but the process was slow and required continuous pressure. Gray later noted that although she eventually achieved better pay, it took consistent advocacy throughout the production. Her experience also reflects the larger struggle many women in Hollywood faced at the time, particularly in genres dominated by male leads. By insisting on fair treatment, she helped set a precedent that influenced similar negotiations for actresses in later science fiction series. Wilma Deering's strong and confident presence on screen was not only a performance choice, it was supported by Gray's real-life resolve and willingness to stand up for herself in an environment where equal compensation was not guaranteed. The Tweaky suit was so dangerous that actors suffered minor injuries during filming. Tweaky became a fan-favorite companion, but the suit worn by the actors inside was difficult and sometimes hazardous to operate. Built with rigid materials for a futuristic appearance, the suit lacked ventilation, causing intense heat to build during filming. Under strong studio lights, temperatures rose quickly, leaving performers exhausted and soaked in sweat. Movement inside the suit was equally challenging. The stiff joints limited mobility, making walking and turning uncomfortable. Actors occasionally stumbled or needed assistance navigating the set because visibility through the visor was extremely narrow. Minor injuries such as bruises and muscle strain were common. Despite these challenges, Felix Silla and later Bob Eliea brought remarkable energy to Tweaky. Their efforts helped create a lively character that audiences loved, even though the performance demanded physical endurance and constant focus behind the scenes. The show reused Battlestar Galactica effects shots without informing some cast members. One of the lesser-known production shortcuts behind Buck Rogers involved borrowing previously filmed effects shots from Battlestar Galactica. Universal had already invested heavily in creating cinematic space battles for Galactica, and the studio quickly realized that repurposing the existing footage would dramatically reduce costs for the new series. Without announcing the decision to the cast, Universal quietly transferred several visual elements, including ship flybys, explosion sequences, and extended space panoramas, directly into Buck Rogers episodes. Many cast and crew members later admitted they were unaware of the extent of this reuse during filming. The strategy reflected the production environment of the late 70s, when tight schedules and limited budgets encouraged creative recycling across projects. Fans eventually noticed identical sequences once home video allowed slow, frame-by-frame comparison. Although intended as a background cost-saving technique, the reuse ended up linking both shows visually and thematically. It also demonstrated how Universal managed to maintain a futuristic look without exceeding its television budget. The shared effects library became part of the larger behind-the-scenes history of both franchises. Several scripts were quietly censored by broadcast standards due to suggestive content. Buck Rogers appeared lighthearted on screen, yet behind the scenes, its writers navigated strict network censorship. NBC maintained detailed content rules for its primetime schedule, and many early drafts submitted by the writing team contained humor, flirtation, or thematic elements that the standards department immediately flagged. This forced frequent rewrites, often completed only days before filming. Writers such as Alan Brennert later confirmed that several character interactions, especially between Buck and Wilma, originally carried stronger romantic tension, but were softened to maintain a family-friendly tone. NBC also insisted on revising scenes that took place in nightclubs or exotic alien environments, ensuring that costuming and background behavior never gave the impression of adult themes. Even minor visual suggestions could trigger a note from censors, and Aaron Gray mentioned that certain costume adjustments required formal approval. These quiet interventions shaped the overall personality of the show, resulting in a polished, futuristic adventure that avoided controversy. Although the show maintained a sense of fun, Much of its final tone resulted from this constant negotiation with the network. Henry Silva was originally set to be the main villain for an entire season. Henry Silva delivered an intense portrayal of Kane in the theatrical pilot, and producers originally intended for him to remain the principal villain throughout the first season. Early production notes reveal that the character was planned as a long-term antagonist, with a consistent presence across multiple story arcs. However, Silva was already committed to several international film projects and could not rearrange his schedule to accommodate the demanding weekly shooting calendar required for the series. Universal attempted to negotiate alternative arrangements, but Silva's contract obligations made an extended role impossible. As a result, the studio recast the character with Michael Ansara, whose calmer and more strategic interpretation reshaped Kane's personality. This tonal shift influenced the direction of the show, transitioning it from the darker cinematic feel of the pilot toward a more approachable weekly adventure format. Fans who saw the theatrical release before the series noticed the sudden change in Kane's appearance and style, but the true reason was rooted entirely in scheduling limitations. Silva's departure became one of the earliest and most significant deviations from the original vision for the series. Colonel Wilma Deering's character was based on a real Air Force officer who never received credit. Colonel Wilma Deering became an iconic presence in Buck Rogers, but her character's authoritative bearing did not come solely from the script. During early development, Universal consulted several active-duty military personnel to ensure that rank, vocabulary, and command behavior reflected real-world procedures. Among these consultants was a female United States Air Force officer whose guidance had a direct influence on Wilma's posture, leadership style, and tactical precision. Her insights shaped how Aaron Gray approached the character, particularly in scenes involving strategic decision-making and military protocol. However, consultants working through government outreach programs were not always credited, and records show that her name never appeared in the final production listings. Gray later acknowledged that her preparation involved observing real military women, though she did not identify any individuals publicly. The omission reflects a broader pattern from the period, when technical advisors often remained uncredited despite playing meaningful roles in shaping authenticity. Wilma's strong presence resonated with audiences, and part of that impact can be traced back to the real officer, whose expertise contributed quietly behind the scenes. The iconic opening narration was re-recorded 3 times after audience test screenings. The opening narration of Buck Rogers, now considered one of its defining elements, went through several iterations before producers settled on the final version. Test screenings for the pilot revealed that the earliest narration sounded overly somber and weighed down the futuristic visuals that followed. Viewers described it as too heavy for the adventurous tone Universal hoped to achieve. Producers commissioned a second recording that offered clearer exposition with a more neutral tone. Although this version tested better, it still lacked the dramatic lift that the creative team believed essential for capturing the spirit of the show. A third recording session produced the authoritative and energetic narration that ultimately opened both the theatrical release and the weekly series. Interviews with producer Glenn Larson confirmed that narration was considered a crucial storytelling tool. It was meant to guide viewers into a world that blended action, optimism, and mystery. The final version succeeded in framing Buck as both a displaced hero and a figure of hope, making it one of the most memorable introductions in classic science fiction television. The show's laser sound effects were borrowed from unused Battlestar Galactica audio libraries. The futuristic laser blasts heard throughout Buck Rogers carried a familiar tone for a reason. Universal had previously created an extensive sound library for Battlestar Galactica, including unused audio elements that never made it into broadcast. When Buck Rogers entered production, the sound team was encouraged to draw from this archive to speed up work and reduce costs. Several of the series' laser sounds came directly from these recordings, sometimes altered and sometimes reused exactly as they were. Cast members later said they did not know the extent of the reuse until years after the show aired. Fans eventually identified matching audio signatures once home video formats allowed careful comparison. This quiet recycling created a subtle continuity between the two shows and demonstrated how resourceful television sound design needed to be during a time of tight budgets and fast production schedules. The hawk species in Season 2 was inspired by actual indigenous warrior designs. When Season 2 introduced the alien hawk species, viewers noticed that their attire and ceremonial style felt strangely familiar. Design notes reveal that the costume team studied real indigenous warrior cultures while developing the hawks. Elements such as feathered crests, face markings, and symbolic patterns were taken from Native American and South American traditions, then adapted into a bird-oriented science fiction appearance. The intention was to create an alien society with depth rather than a simple fantasy costume. This approach added a cultural richness that helped the hawks stand out visually. Although the show did not explicitly credit these influences, production artists later acknowledged that real-world tribes inspired the final look. As a result, the hawks became one of the most visually striking species in Buck Rogers, grounded partly in authentic human history and partly in stylized science fiction imagination. Erin Gray's uniform was modified after viewers complained about reflexive light reflection on camera. Erin Gray's original Wilma Deering uniform featured bright metallic material that looked futuristic under studio lights. However, during early filming, technicians noticed that the fabric reflected light too strongly, causing bright flares and unintended glare on camera. These reflections disrupted several scenes and required adjustments to lighting setups. Producers quickly ordered alterations to the costume. The uniform was recreated using a matte version of the same color palette, while keeping the sleek futuristic design intact. Erin Gray later commented that the original version made her appear overly illuminated, almost glowing under heavy lighting. The redesign allowed for cleaner shots and more consistent on-screen appearance. Although this change seemed small, it shows how technical issues behind the scenes influence costume design, and how even iconic outfits evolve to meet the practical needs of filming. The show shot multiple endings for key episodes to trick leakers. In an era before the internet, producers of Buck Rogers adopted a strategy to combat early leaks and spoilers. They filmed multiple endings for select high-stakes episodes. Internal memos show that for key episodes, the crew shot 2 or even 3 alternate conclusions. Only after post-production editing did they choose which version would air. Writers and directors later confirmed that this practice aimed to keep advanced script readers and guest actors uncertain of the actual outcome. One alternate ending remained unused and stored in the archive. The method helped maintain suspense for live broadcast viewers, since even crew members were sometimes unsure which version would air. While commonplace now in major film franchises, this approach was unusual at the time for episodic television. The layered production planning reveals how seriously the show's makers treated audience engagement and spoiler prevention. The robot Dr. Theopolis was controlled by 2 operators hidden within the set structures. Dr. Theopolis, the wise-mouthed cylinder robot carried by Twiki, seems simple on screen, yet its operation involved layered mechanics. According to behind-the-scenes production commentary, 2 crew members controlled Theopolis. One handled the voice, via offset audio link, and another physically manipulated the unit's lighting effects and hidden internal motors, concealed in the set's furniture or platform beneath Twiki's chest area. The voice operator synced dialogue with Twiki's movements, while the motor operator triggered mechanical eye blinks and small gestures. The complexity was surprising given Theopolis's modest appearance. This setup allowed the character to appear autonomous, despite relying on concealed human operators. The strategy enhanced the illusion of a self-thinking robot, and added depth to what might otherwise have remained a static prop. It reflects how television production layered character illusion into even small supporting roles. Buck's ship, the Starfighter, was originally designed for a different sci-fi series. Before Buck Rogers entered full production, Universal's art department had a collection of unused spacecraft designs created for earlier science fiction concepts, including abandoned Battlestar Galactica spin-off proposals. Among these archive sketches was a sleek single-pilot fighter design that never made it into Galactica's final cut. When Buck Rogers moved into pre-production, designers repurposed and modified this unused model into the Starfighter used by Earth Defense Forces. Model makers confirmed in interviews that the ship's wing structure, cockpit layout, and stabilizer fins came directly from shelved Galactica concept art. Only after adaptation did it become the ship recognized in the series. This reuse saved both time and money since the molds and scale models already existed. The final result gave Buck Rogers a distinctive spacecraft while linking it to Universal's larger sci-fi visual heritage. The The starfighter's lineage is now widely acknowledged by archivists and fans who study model construction photos, early sketches, and production documentation. The original theme song had lyrics before producers removed them. The Buck Rogers theme is remembered as an instrumental opening filled with futuristic energy, but early drafts included a fully written vocal track. Composer Stu Phillips noted in interviews that he originally conceived a slow romantic vocal theme intended for the pilot's opening sequence. Early promotional cuts of the pilot even featured a version with female vocals layered over orchestration. However, NBC executives believed the lyrical version mismatched the more action-oriented direction of the series. They requested a thematic shift to an instrumental arrangement that suggested adventure rather than sentimentality. As a result, Phillips reworked the theme into the orchestral version used in the opening credits. The lyrical version did air in limited theatrical prints of the pilot movie, but was removed for television release. Enthusiasts later recovered these audio segments from early soundtrack releases and archival recordings, confirming the existence of the discarded lyrics. This unusual musical revision reveals how the tone of Buck Rogers continued to evolve, even after filming had begun, with music becoming a key tool in shaping the show's identity. The show used a unique glow filter, only applied to 3 Universal productions. Buck Rogers carried a distinct soft glow visual texture that set it apart from other late 70s television series. This appearance came from a specialized diffusion filter developed within Universal's cinematography department. According to accounts from camera operators, only 3 Universal productions use this filter: the Buck Rogers pilot, a handful of late Galactica episodes, and an experimental television film. The filter created a halo effect around bright objects, giving Buck Rogers an otherworldly sheen that matched the futuristic aesthetic. It softened edges, enhanced metallic surfaces, and made costumes appear more luminous on camera. Lighting technicians had to adjust multiple scenes because the filter amplified reflections. The effect was technologically ambitious for the era. As production advanced, the effect was toned down slightly for clarity, but the signature glow remained most noticeable in the pilot and earliest episodes. Over time, the glow has become a recognizable part of the show's visual identity, representing a unique snapshot of television experimentation during a transitional period in sci-fi cinematography. Many Alien extras wore recycled Universal monster masks from the 1960s. Budget constraints during the first season led Universal's makeup department to recycle an unexpected resource: leftover rubber monster masks from earlier Universal horror properties and low-budget genre productions filmed during the 1960s. Makeup archivists have identified masks originally created for films such as The Leech Woman and various creature features repurposed with repainted textures or added prosthetic details for Buck Rogers' alien characters. Extras playing background aliens in nightclub scenes, spaceport crowds, and council chambers sometimes wore altered versions of these old masks. The decision arose from practical needs. Creating new prosthetics for dozens of background aliens in a weekly series would have been cost prohibitive. By modifying existing mask molds, the production team saved money while still providing a diverse array of unusual alien designs. Dedicated fans later recognized the reused pieces when high-resolution still photos became available through DVD and Blu-ray releases. The practice reflects Universal's long-standing tradition of repurposing physical assets across multiple film and television projects. A planned spin-off, focused on the Searcher crew, was canceled due to budget cuts. When Season 2 introduced the Searcher, a starship dedicated to exploration, producers quietly began developing a potential spin-off series centered on the ship's crew. Concept notes indicate that the proposed show would have followed a more serious tone, with standalone exploration missions similar to Star Trek. Writers drafted early character outlines and mission concepts, but the project faced immediate obstacles. Universal experienced budget tightening during the early 80s, and the performance of Buck Rogers itself did not meet the projected ratings needed to justify a second series. As a result, development halted before filming test material. The cancellation left several partially developed story concepts unused, including detailed planetary encounters and new alien civilizations. These ideas were later referenced by writers in interviews discussing abandoned science fiction concepts that never reached production. The spin-off's cancellation contributed to the abrupt tone shift in late Season 2, as producers no longer needed to establish narrative groundwork for a future series. The final episode was never intended to be a series finale. The final broadcast episode, The Dorian Secret, was not designed to close the story of Buck Rogers. Universal and NBC initially expected a third season and continued development during early pre-planning. However, declining ratings and shifting network priorities resulted in the show's cancellation with little warning. This sudden decision meant the last episode aired without narrative resolution for several character arcs. Crew members later confirmed that multiple storylines were planned for a third season, including deeper exploration of the Searcher mission and new adversaries. The unexpected cancellation halted all work, leaving the Season 2 finale as a cliffhanger rather than a conclusion. This abrupt ending surprised viewers who expected a follow-up season, especially because promotional material for Season 2 hinted at long-term story development. Today, the incomplete finale remains part of the show's legacy and represents how network decisions can abruptly change the trajectory of a television series. Buck Rogers in the 25th Century remains a fascinating snapshot of a television era shaped by ambition, compromise, and creative improvisation. Behind the bright sets and upbeat energy existed a complex world of recycled effects, evolving character visions, abandoned plans, and experiments that pushed the limits of what weekly science fiction could achieve. Each unusual fact reveals the hidden work of artists, technicians, and performers who built a future out of limited resources and stubborn determination. Although the series ended abruptly, its legacy lives on through fans who continue to uncover the stories behind its production. Buck Rogers endures not only as entertainment, but as a testament to the strange, inventive spirit that defined classic science fiction television.